This book is about stepsisters in Holland. As a person from Oregon, I'm required to prefer Dutch brothers. I realize that making a joke about an Oregon coffee chain is probably not the best way to start a review. So here's a picture of my dog wearing a Dutch Brothers collar. She is so cute.
Argo Funk Book Review. Argo Funk Book Review.
Part 1. Marguerite Fisher is an angry and street-smart woman with 2 children. Ruth is older. She has some kind of developmental disability that prevents her from talking. Iris is the younger one. She's our main character. It suggested something really terrible happened with their father in England. Like, even worse than 15 years of Disney live-action remakes. Marguerite was forced to flee the country and return to the village where her father lived. They catch a brief glimpse of Clara, a beautiful child who is rumored to be a changeling. Marguerite is hired as a housekeeper for a painter named Lucas Schoenmaker. He's referred to as the Master. The Master is practically the main character of the book, as he keeps getting most of the focus and dialogue. Even during the famous Cinderella ball, the Master is far more prominent than the Prince. The Master's apprentice, Casper, also gets more attention than the Prince. To be sure, it's a strange decision that the evil stepmother's former boss is such a major player in this story. I thought the Master was moderately interesting, but he's not good enough to justify him being the entire book. Here at the start, there's about 40 to 50 pages of this guy being philosophical, discussing the nature of art, beauty, and the grotesque. I don't blame readers who gave up on the book in part 1 because not enough happens. The Master does a portrait of Iris. This is revealed as a cruel deception. He was hired to make a purposely ugly painting by the wealthy Heer de Vandermeer. Vandermeer became rich thanks to the Dutch tulip mania of the 1630s. No joke, people went crazy for Dutch tulips that decade. Like, one bulb could be sold for over 10 times a normal person's yearly salary. That's the equivalent of this video getting over 80 million views. Vandermeer commissions the Master to make a portrait with flowers. He also hires Iris's family to live with him and teaches daughter Clara how to speak English. That's the sort of off-the-cuff decision you can make when you're richer than God. Part 2. Clara is pretty reserved and rarely talks. Her life is like a prison since her overbearing mother refuses to let her leave the house. She's about as mature and developed as a child half her age. Iris draws Clara out of her shell by talking about imaginary creatures like changelings and imps. I said the book is obsessed with art and beauty. Well, it's also obsessed with these fairy tale creatures, and the narrative will not stop talking about the changelings like they're real. The Master's portrait of Clara is a masterpiece that only intensifies the Master's suffering. He spends the rest of the book complaining he hates the painting which made him famous. He'll never be able to top that masterpiece, and nobody cares about anything else he does. This book was written by the same person who wrote Wicked. It sounds like he's incredibly resentful of Wicked's success. Mrs. Vandermeer is pregnant. Part 3, Mrs. Vandermeer is dead. That makes Iris notice things, like the fact that Casper is pretty good looking. Nothing like death to jumpstart a crush. Clara is devastated by her mother's death because she has the emotional intelligence of a 6-year-old. Sadly, nobody has any sympathy for her. The weather outside matches the coldness of their hearts. Clara and Iris go ice skating. They find a broken windmill. Even though Clara has never left the house before, she knows where everything in the building is. She claims she was here when the fairies kidnapped her and turned her into a changeling. About a month later, Marguerite convinces Vandermeer to marry her. Alcohol was involved in the making of this decision. Tensions rise between Marguerite and Clara. Clara is forced to do most of the household chores when the maid dies of plague. Clara resigns herself to being a cinder girl for the rest of her life, and she somewhat likes it because it lets her avoid everyone. I felt pretty bad for her. but judging from what other reviewers have said, readers are supposed to hate Cinderella because she's beautiful. It's announced that the elderly Queen of France is holding a ball to find a bride for her godson. She also wants to find a portrait artist, which guarantees the master will stick around for another 150 pages. They get invitations to the ball shortly before the tulip market is ruined. Half of the town goes bankrupt. Part 4. Marguerite abuses Clara's beauty to allay the creditors who have come to collect the family's debts. She refuses to let Cinderella attend the ball because that will hurt Iris's chances of marrying the prince. Clara and her father tell more of the story of how she was kidnapped and held for ransom as a 3-year-old. She thinks the fairies did it, and that's when she became a changeling. Her father heartily agrees with her. I assumed this regular talk of fairies would lead to a big payoff with Cinderella's fairy godmother, but not really. If anyone's the fairy godmother, it's Iris. Iris remembers where to find some lost jewels. Casper sells them in order to purchase a wonderful ball gown for Cinderella. The plan is to disguise her with a veil and a false name, so no one will recognize her. The other part of the plan is to get Marguerite out of the way by putting pepper in her eyes while she sleeps. That makes her go permanently blind. This strikes me as an uncharacteristically cruel thing for any of these young girls to do. To be fair, though, it's what Marguerite would do if their positions were reversed. Part 5. At the ball, many women are introduced to Prince Philippe. He instantly likes Iris because she's an artist and they can both speak in English. He mistakes her reticence for playing hard to get, and you could almost believe the two of them will fall in love. Iris is instantly forgotten once Cinderella arrives. Cinderella and the prince go into a side room. The door remains locked for several hours as they do adult things together. It is strongly suggested these activities were non-consensual. Marguerite tries to burn the master's portrait. Iris stops her in time. Iris spends the ball struggling with her feelings for Casper, as well as a false rumor that Casper dislikes women. The ball comes to an abrupt end when the house catches on fire. Everybody's forced to evacuate. Back at home, Marguerite catches Cinderella sneaking into the house. She demands to know what's going on, and she's told the traditional version of the Cinderella fairy tale. The book almost switches genres at the end, turning into a mystery. We get big revelations. Marguerite killed Mrs. Vandermeer. Ruth is the arsonist, and Ruth has been the narrator for the whole book. That is, they switched ugly stepsisters on us. While Cinderella moves away with the prince, nobody gets a happy ever after. Most of the characters die young. The end. Post-book follow-up. I did not like this book. Apart from the characters being fairly unlikable, I think the main problem is that it's a Cinderella story, which takes 200 pages to get to the Cinderella story. It's excessively wordy, with a lot of unnecessary talk that doesn't seem to go anywhere. I shouldn't be too surprised that the literary critics loved this book, as it has a lot of philosophical discussion of art and beauty. There's also plenty of literary double talk. Like they have a conversation about ice skating, it's really a conversation about life. I didn't like these parts. The conversations had an unnatural edge to them, like they were merely a vehicle to say deep truths. I wish there was more variety to the book's insights. After reading Calvinism is Bad for the 10th time, I was bored. I really wanted the author to move on. As a fractured fairy tale, I found this to be fairly standard. I could have guessed most of the plot based on the premise that the ugly stepsister is the hero. That means the stepsister isn't really ugly, she's more plain than anything else. Likewise, the murdering stepmother is a misunderstood nice woman who is only trying to provide for her daughters. Or at least she thinks so. As for Cinderella, the story has to bring her down to build up the stepsister as the hero. Instead of making her an all-out villain, that fate is reserved for the prince, she's more of a spoiled, inexperienced child who's crushed by trauma and retreats into a fairy tale world. Her beauty is presented as a burden, a curse, a prison that she can't possibly escape from. The book repeats ugly, good, beauty, bad, with all the persistence and fury of a scorned high schooler who didn't get asked to prom. I should know, I didn't go to prom either. Overall, better than Confessions of a Teen Sleuth, worse than Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. I give Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister a 1 out of 10.